Do you think I can record a video here? It's a little bit too bright, and I suppose you can still hear the noise of the cars. What about here? I don't know, the background's just a little bit weird. And the problem with recording here by the window is that it's like really bright for me, so I mean, if you look in the reflection of my sunglasses here, we've got nice blue skies, it's bright, it's sunny, but yeah, it really hurts my eyes if I'm recording without glasses on. So I'm gonna be moving jobs in the next month, and yeah, I've basically just gone through the whole interview process. I've landed a job, and it's probably a pretty good time to share with you guys my 5 tips on acing an interview, because I've just gone through the process myself, right? So the first tip and most important tip I want to give you guys is to find out what your market value is. So that's point number 1. Find out what your market value is, and unfortunately this is going to be very different for a lot of you guys, because I think location plays a pretty big role in how much money you can actually earn. And yeah, if you guys are based in the United States, there is a really cool website called Glassdoor. So Glassdoor helps you find jobs, but they also have a pretty cool calculator on their website. So I'm going to leave a link to that in the video description below. You're going to have to sign up and then just put in a bunch of details like your job title and your location, and then they'll be able to figure out what your salary should be, and they'll give you a bit of an estimate of what you should be asking for. Unfortunately, Glassdoor doesn't really work all that well if you are not within the United States. I mean, it's great for the United States, I think, but if you are not within the United States, you can try PayScale, and if you are in the United States, try PayScale as well. It's just good to try a bunch of different websites, because everybody's got different or access to different data, and they'll probably give you a slightly different result. But yeah, go ahead and try PayScale out. So it's gonna work in a very similar way. Just sign up, put in your job title and your location, and they'll be able to give you an estimate on what they think you are worth based on the data that they've collected. I do think that PayScale has given me a slightly lower value than it should, but hey, that's just the whole point of trying a bunch of different websites. Something else I can try if I'm in South Africa. So if you guys are in South Africa, there is a completely dev-focused website called OfferZen, very similar to Glassdoor. And they'll also be able to, you know, if you read some of their blogs, give you information on what they say the average salary of a developer in Cape Town or in Johannesburg is. Having access to that information is extremely valuable, because when you go into that job interview and you're starting to negotiate a salary, then you will really be able to drive that conversation, and you will know if you're being underpaid or if the job offer is going to underpay you or not. Of course, if you don't have a job, then at that time, maybe take the job. But if you do have a job and you want to make sure that you're not getting underpaid, of course, you've got access to the information that you need to make sure that that doesn't happen. And I think another important topic or note that I can make here is, now that you have access to this info, don't accept job offers if they don't mention salaries up front. Rather push for an upfront salary before you actually go into an interview, because you don't want to go like waste your time doing interviews for jobs if you're not positive that you are going to be getting a market value or your market value worth of a salary. The second point I'm going to make here is to prepare for taking a test, because when you go into a job interview, a lot of interviews either make you do a test at the time that you're doing the interview, or they'll send you an email and ask you to complete a test before you come for the interview. And I know a website that has been used in the past is Codility, so I'm going to leave a link to Codility down below. And Codility is a website where employers can pay for certain tests that can be sent out to a potential employee. And if you go through some of the lessons on Codility, you will be able to pass the tests that you get given. Also, another website is Testdome, does exactly the same thing, but I've had Codility actually being used in interviews that I have done. I just haven't had Testdome used yet, but I think they are a pretty good website. And yeah, I guess if you just Google programming test or coding test, you'll probably find a few hundred other good websites to use as well. One thing that's worth noting about these websites is they are really good at testing your technical ability, so they'll be able to test whether you actually know how to use arrays and functions and objects and that kind of stuff. What they aren't really good at doing is testing your practical ability at building something, right? And this is probably a more valuable skill to have, is to be able to practically build something. And that brings me to my next point, which is point number 3. Have something to show your employer or your potential employer when you go into a meeting. If you don't have a computer or a laptop that you can walk into a meeting with, then yeah, definitely ask a friend or invest in one, buy a computer, because or buy a laptop, sorry, because yeah, that way you can go into the interview knowing that the thing that you built that you'd like to show these people is definitely going to work, because if it works on your computer, it's gonna work, right? And if you've taken your laptop into the meeting with you and you get to that point where your employer or your potential employer is asking you, what you've built in the past, and if you know how to use Laravel or whatever it is that they want you to know, you can then pull out your computer and say, here is a project that I have done, and it uses Laravel and Ajax and AngularJS, and this is what it's capable of doing, and just show off all the features of this thing that you built. So if it can log people in and has Ajax search and all of that stuff, that's gonna go a long way to helping you get the job. And the amount of people that actually walk into an interview with something to show the interviewer is gonna be such a little amount of people. Like, you are gonna be in the minority if you can actually walk into that interview and show your interviewer something. And yeah, if they know what they're talking about, if they know programming languages, they'll probably ask you to show you some of their code, etc. And I just think that that is gonna put you miles above anybody else who's actually applied for the job. And I could even say that it's gonna guarantee that you get the job, because there are very few people who actually walk in there with something prepared and something to show the interviewer. Tip number 4 that I want to give you guys is to take a personality test. And I know a lot of people look at that and go, okay, what the heck, a personality test for a job interview? Why would I need that? And I guess depending on where you are in the world, definitely in the United States, in South Africa, in the UK, and a lot of other countries, when you go for a job interview, you will be asked questions about your personality. And a lot of people kind of hate that, because it's like, why are you asking me questions about my personality? Because it has nothing to do with whether I can do the job or not. And it kind of does, right? Because when you go into a job or into a working environment, you're probably going to have to work with a team of people. And if you don't match, or if your personality doesn't really line up with the rest of the team, it might cause a few clashes, right? So when you get asked questions about what's your greatest weakness and that kind of stuff, a lot of people look at those questions and go, it's just another test that I have to pass. Maybe what I need to do is take a strength, disguise my strength as a weakness, and answer the question that way. And like, I look at that kind of stuff and I'm just like, no, like, what are you doing? You can answer a question in that way, but I think the most important thing is just to remain truthful. And when you get asked what's your greatest weakness, you should know what your weaknesses are. You should know what your personality is, and you should be able to describe that, or at least talk to an interviewer about that. So if you take a personality test, I've done the same personality test multiple times, and yeah, on this website, 16 personality types. I often land up getting either the commander or the debater, but most often the debater, and I think that lines up with my personality really well, because I do argue and debate a lot with people. Sometimes not even because I think they're wrong, I just choose to take the opposing side and see what they say and see all the points that they make. And yeah, being the debater, it does, that's one thing, it's a strength, but it's also a weakness, because as a weakness, I'm very argumentative, and they'll say that on the page here. So once you've done the test, you will get a page with your strengths and weaknesses. And yeah, being the debater, it does mean that I'm really knowledgeable, I'm very creative, I like to think of new ideas. Those are all strong points of being the debater, but my weaknesses also as a debater, I'm very argumentative, and sometimes I can be a little bit insensitive to people, and I think that really hits the nail on the head there. That's exactly who I am. So this personality test, I feel, does describe me quite well, but it also gives me something to say in the job interview, right? When somebody asks, what's your greatest weakness? I can say, well, I'm a very argumentative person because I'm a debater, and that doesn't sound so good in the interview. So yeah, if I maybe use some of the words that have been put down in this result set over here, I can talk about how being a debater is a strength. So it means that I'm knowledgeable, it means that I'm a quick thinker, it means that I'm original and creative, but it also means that sometimes I can be argumentative. And yeah, when you describe that kind of stuff to an employer or an interviewer, they will understand it that way, as it's just part of your personality. There's also a whole section on workplace habits and talking about how you might behave in the workplace as well. So very interesting read, very interesting thing to do. I'd say, even if you're not on the job search, maybe just do a personality test anyway and see if you find out something about yourself. And tip number 5 is to interview the interviewer. So I know I'm wearing a different shirt right now. It's the next day. I don't think yesterday when I recorded this video, I don't think I did a good job at talking about point number 5. But yeah, point number 5 that I want to make is, don't let the interview only be about the interviewer asking you questions. Ultimately, you're going to go into this job and spend about 40 hours a week there. I don't know, give or take a couple hours, but you're going to be spending the vast majority of your time that you're not spending at home in the office. And you need to make sure that this is going to be a good job and a good fit for you. So don't, go in there all about the money and accepting a job offer just on the money, because you also want to find out if the employer is going to be a good employer. You want to find out if the team environment is going to work well for you. So you should ask questions about all that stuff. And I think a few things that I like to watch out for, and you know what, you can't take this as 100% truth, but there are a few things that I just like to watch out for, because when I see an employer asking for things like loyalty and for you to be hardworking, etc., I think all of those qualities should come standard. Like, I know if I'm going to go work for a company, if it's a good company and they treat me well, I'm going to work hard and I am going to be loyal to them. What I find is companies who specifically state that they're looking for somebody to be loyal, and they specifically state that they're looking for somebody to be hardworking, it's because they might be treating you badly, or they treat other employees badly in the past, and employees left the company and ran away, not because they weren't loyal, but because they were treated badly. And so yeah, I just find that companies who state that kind of obvious stuff down is maybe not a good company to work for. Sometimes companies disguise a positive thing or negative things as a positive thing. So something that happened with me quite often in a couple of interviews is employers tried to pass this thing off as something that was really positive. They said, come work at our company because everybody is young, nobody is over the age of 35, so we're all more or less the same age, we all know each other, we all get along. And they pass that off as a positive, and maybe it sounds positive to you right now, but when you really think about it, it's like, but what happens to all the older people? And what happens if I'm at the company for like 5 years and then I'm 30, and then, do I have to leave the company, or do I just naturally leave the company, or like, what's going on here? Like, why are there only young people at your company? And, thinking about it and looking at the salaries they offer, I think for the most part, it's just because they want to pay young people less, and they understand that as a young person, it might be only your first or your second job in your lifetime, and you probably don't have all these adult things figured out yet, so you're not paying off a house, so you don't even know what it's going to cost to buy a house just yet. You probably haven't factored in medical care into your salary, especially if you're in a country where medical care isn't like standard. So that kind of stuff you haven't factored into your salary yet. And yeah, because of all of that stuff, maybe you're willing to work for less, and so they will just pay you less, even though you can do exactly the same job as somebody slightly older who has a family or who has a house and these other types of expenses that they sort of require a higher salary for, you can do the exact same job as them. So technically you should have the same money as them, but just because you're a younger person, they want to pay you less. But don't take that as an absolute rule. I think you know, you can still use that time to interview the interviewer, ask them a bunch of questions, and find out why everybody is young. Maybe they've got some good answers for you. It's just something that I personally would watch out for, especially when you talk about salaries at the end of, or yeah, somewhere in that meeting. When you talk about salaries, if they're offering you less and they've said that, then you know it's kind of the only reason why they're hiring young people is because they can pay young people less. And look, this is by far not the only negative thing that gets passed off as a positive thing. I think companies can do this a lot with other stuff as well. But yeah, just the one thing that really stood out for me, and I guess it's because I'm a young person, is I noticed that this was happening. And yeah, like I know when I want to go into a company in future that I want to go into a company where I have a long-term future. I want to go into a company where I know that if I work there for long enough, I can afford to buy property, I can afford to buy a house. Because yeah, I mean, that's one of the major things that people look for in determining whether your life was a success or not, if you were able to buy property. And I think if you go into a company and then you realize that everybody's young and everybody's renting and nobody has a house yet, it's probably because we can't afford houses. And like if everybody at a company is young, the reason why they're all young is because the older people that have stayed there for some time realized that they needed more money if they wanted to buy a house, and they had to leave the company to get that more, you know, that bit of money that they needed. And before I end of this video, I just want to send a huge shout out to my sponsors at Dev Mountain. So if you guys don't know what Dev Mountain is, it is a coding bootcamp, and they'll teach you everything you need to know to be an iOS developer, a web developer, or a UX designer. So if you're looking to make a career change, or if you've just finished high school and you are looking to get into a career, you should really check out their website and take a look at some of their courses, because they'll teach you everything you need to know in 13 weeks. Now, I have heard some people say that 13 weeks is a really long time to go without a salary while you're learning how to code. But in hindsight, you know, studying at a university is going to be a couple years, so I think 13 weeks is an incredibly fast timeline, especially since it allows you to change careers after 13 weeks, which is good. And yeah, there are a bunch of cool perks that come with studying with them, because you'll have free accommodation while you're studying, and you will be able to get a job at the end of the course. So they've got a placement program where they'll help you find a job, which is pretty cool. And yeah, that's all I have for this video, but don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, like, and share this video, because all of that stuff is going to help my channel grow, and I'll see you guys in the next one.